This show is brought to you in part by some amazing people. I like to call them my Patreon podcast producers. They're all on Instagram, so go give them a follow. Daryl at Your Level Fitness, Amy at Gym of the Gym, that's GEM of the GYM, Caitlin at Caitlin Elise. Make sure you put a Y in her name. That's 3 Ys because she's 3 times as awesome. Crystal at Reduced Fat Mama. I always love that name. Very clever. And Emily at M is the Biggest Loser. That's EM is the Biggest Loser. But guess what? She's a winner, as is all of these fine folks. And if you want to have your name read right here alongside of them, stay tuned to the end of the show for more details. Are you Team Apple? I got to shout out all of you checking out this show right now on an iPhone, iPad, etc. In fact, nearly 70% of you are listening to me on one of these devices. It would mean the world to me if you took a moment to leave a review. This is one of the best things that you can do for this podcast to help get the word out. And while you're at it, leave reviews for some of your other favorite shows. I bet they would really dig it. Oh, yeah! Pretty rough day at work. It was just crazy. We had like 2 people out and I was kind of running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And of course I got water goals. I've been pounding this gallon of water and peeing all day long. And so naturally it's just been a wild day between working hard, pretty much alone, and going to the restroom at all hours of the day, usually like every 20 minutes. It's been nuts.
Nice.
So, yeah, man, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad we got you on here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk. You do some good stuff.
I really appreciate that. One of the things I like to ask everybody, you know, you've heard some of my podcasts. How did we get connected? Because I always get, you know, we connect with so many people over Instagram. Right. It's crazy. Do you remember how we got connected?
I'm honestly I'm not 100% sure. Like I think it was just me, you know, diving through, looking for inspiration, you know, different inspirational accounts and people doing good work. And
sure,
I think we started then probably passing around in some couple different circles, because we're definitely not, I think, in the same, like diet sphere per se, in terms of like our plans and everything.
Sure.
So, I think it was more from like the inspiration motivation standpoint. I think we probably listened to a lot of the same podcasts, and I know you've connected a lot with Daryl Perry, and I've talked with him a lot. So I think I've seen a lot of the stuff you guys have done together. So I'm sure that kind of drew us together a bit.
Definitely. Daryl is certainly the man. I have a great appreciation for that guy and his contributions to the community. And something you said there, I really want to hit the nail on that one. You talk about we kind of come from different diet spheres, different circles. And that's what I love most about this community, is that for the most part, you'll run into some really great people, and they're from all different walks of life. You might have like vegans, vegetarians, folks that are doing keto or Weight Watchers or whatever it is. And we all come from these different walks of diet lives. And somehow we all come together because at the end of the day, we have, you know, kind of very similar goals, not exactly the same, because we're all different bodies, different unique makes, but we have similar goals. We all have a similar place we want to get to. We just maybe have a different road to get there. You might take the highway, I might take the back road. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, definitely. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I think it's great that people can, because I think sometimes, like, especially on other platforms, you see more divisiveness happening. I think when you follow a different way,
right.
People tend to get a little zealous about what they're doing, and my way is right, your way is wrong. And whereas I think like some of the best people I've connected with on Instagram don't do anything that I do. I mean, do some things, but like mostly don't do a lot of the things that I do. But like you said, we all have some commonality in terms of our goals and our even just our looking for that motivation and that wanting to continue with what we're doing.
Definitely. I know that, like, for the most part, I mean, I would say like 98, maybe 99% of the people I've come across have all been positive, very supportive. I mean, it's just that very like one or two that I might have come across in the
Right.
last 2 years that might have been bad eggs, so to speak. We just didn't
Mm-hmm.
vibe right. But like, for the most part, this community is just unreal. And I couldn't imagine getting to the level where I've gotten without the help of this community, just the outpouring support that we get on a daily basis, interacting. And of course we're giving it back. We're communicating with our friends out there, but just the amount of support, I think that sometimes we don't give it enough credit. I don't mean me or you personally, but just a general statement. Like, maybe we don't give the community enough credit for how much it really benefits in a journey. Yes, we're out there working out, we're doing the work, we're the ones who are slapping the donut out of our hand or what have you. But the power of the community, it just gives you enough to want to keep going.
Oh, definitely. I think you're completely right. I did some stories the other night, I think it was Sunday night, saying how I don't think I'd be where I am right now without that greater community, without that support, without that feedback and reinforcement, and kind of knowing that there are people listening who are going through similar things.
Yeah, definitely. And while we're kind of on the topic of community and Instagram, normally I'd switch already and we'll, talk about obviously your history, but let's stay on Instagram just for a moment. I'd love to know.
Sure.
I think it's kind of interesting when you find out like how everybody decided they wanted to start doing this, like documenting their journey, as opposed to like, I know if you scroll far enough back on my page, and I never hid them, I just kept them, but like there's videos of me from 6 years ago chugging beer on a boat somewhere, drunk as hell, know, and then at some point you make a decision, hey, let me document my journey on social media. When did that moment come for you that you're like, you know what, I think I'm just going to start sharing this?
Sure. Well, I think for me, because like this account, and I still have a lot of followers that follow the quote unquote old days.
Right.
My account didn't start out what it is now. It didn't start out tracking a health journey. It was just, I like to say it was my personal sideshow.
Right.
It was me living the quote unquote fat guy life. Displays of gluttony and excess. And, all those kind of things, like my own personal challenges with food, but not personal challenges like my struggles, but more like personal challenge. How much am I going to eat tonight, and how much can I show?
Sure.
It was like a billboard for me of, hey, I'm the happy fat guy and I have no problems. And I think that was something, it was interesting because I started connecting with a lot of people on the fitness side of things, because I think there are people specifically in different areas of fitness focused communities that relate to a lot of that experience. And specifically, I've connected with a lot of people like in bodybuilding and powerlifting and things along those lines who saw some similar, drives that I had towards food and fat, that they had towards the things they were doing. So I started making connections that way. And I actually, at one point, I think it was like 2015, 2016, when I was doing one of my weight loss attempts, I switched off this account that I'm on and made another one that was supposed to be like a completely just focused on the health experience. And, I ended up abandoning that and coming back to, my quote unquote old ways again. Yeah. And then when I decided this time when I was like, okay, I felt more focused and more sure of why I was doing what I was doing, all of that. I knew that I couldn't just leave behind what I had already done and try to pretend that it didn't exist or something along those lines. I needed to embrace that part of my journey. So definitely. I started making some changes to first I kept the same handle and was going forward with what I was doing. And then I made a decision to change my handle and get my handle a little more focused on where I was, because I felt like it wasn't reflecting who I was anymore.
Right.
And so I always knew, and I think that also had a lot to do with, so I was a no shame Instagrammer. Like, yeah, it's funny now, before and after picture, I have some pretty wild work pictures and people are like, I have these pictures. Why did you take these pictures? And I was like, because I was stunting for Instagram, when I was, 480, 470 pounds, 500 pounds, like I was doing it then. So I've got all this material, quote unquote. So it's pretty easy to draw from it. And it also speaks to where my head was then in my life. And I think it also then resonates with some people. So it's not been obviously a smooth journey in any way, but like, I think the Instagram part, I've kept that there. So I have some people now that are the biggest supporters of what I'm doing, my fitness and my health and my weight loss, who were people that were also cheering when I would order a second large pizza or make a second trip to McDonald's in a day or things along those lines. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see people, take that journey with me too.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I like when people come along for the ride, but then you're also along for their ride, and you're just showing out
For
mutual
sure.
support. That's really key.
Definitely.
When you're talking about like putting out the food out there on Instagram, were you like one of those competitive eaters? Like, I know I fell in the trap of like, obviously I was home sitting on my ass watching TV, and I'd watch like Man versus Food and want to be that guy, like going to the places. So I used to talk a lot on the podcast about how Yelp would like plan my weekend. All right, well, we can go to this area, because they have this restaurant. And I remember, I'd find places on Man versus Food and try to go there and maybe want to take a challenge or two. And even being a bigger guy, I usually failed miserably, but it's just kind of crazy. So how much of that did you do? Like, did you actually take part in like real challenges and stuff like that?
It was rare. I never really, maybe once or twice I did something that was like an official challenge at a restaurant or something along those lines.
Yeah.
To me, it was more personal and intimate, I think. And also, because I think this hits on a lot of it for me. Like, there was obviously shame with my behavior.
Yeah.
So I wasn't doing, I still feel like, I used to say PDGs, public displays of gluttony. Yeah. I wasn't hiding anything in public per se, or I guess I was hiding how deep and how far it went. So I would still, in public, not be ashamed of anything I was doing, but I wouldn't push it as far as I would behind closed doors. But the door was open to Instagram during that time. I was tracking it there and showing it there, because realistically at that point, my account, I don't think anyone I knew in real life, offline was on the account at that point. I purposely wasn't, that account wasn't something that I shared with people that I worked with or friends or family or anything along those lines. It was something that was just for that experience. I had a separate Instagram account that they all followed that never showed any of it.
Yeah. I get that. And also on a sidebar, I should mention that, like I find it's crazy that the people that can do the competitive eating, and like a lot of times are like people that are like way smaller than us. Like there's this guy on YouTube that I follow, Matt Stoney, and this guy, he will build for people that don't know, Matt Stoney, it's STONIE. And this guy will just build these elaborate plates. Like he had one was like 10,000 French fries or something. And then like 30 burger, whatever. And, he'll go on there and just competitively eat. And I know he's like competed at Coney Island with the hot dogs. I'm just like, man, that's crazy. And this guy is like, he's got to be maybe $180.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know where they put all that food, man. Cause I know I'd take one look at something, I'd go window shopping and I gain 5 pounds. I know you know about that.
Oh, definitely. And there's clearly something going on metabolically. And there's that whole idea, the concept in competitive eating of the fat belt.
Yeah.
The fact that, that once you start to have the fat on your body, it prevents the stomach expansion that you need to get to kind of the quote unquote heights.
Right.
I keep saying quote unquote. The heights that they get to with the amount of food, but I could put it back. I had pretty good capacity for a big, like, it wasn't like I was eating that all the time, but I was, I could do some damage. I was never really scared off of anything like, oh, that'll be too much, or I hadn't had enough or anything along those lines. Like I more would look at what they were doing and be like, okay, they're doing X number of hot dogs. Why don't I see how many hot dogs I can do? That sort of thing.
Oh yeah. I remember Elevation Burger. I don't know if they're still around, but they had like, they would put up the 9 patties on the burger. I think as far as I got was ever maybe 6. But that's not even the biggest thing. The biggest thing I ever took on, there was a place, it's gone now in Fairfax, called Icons, and they had a 4-pound sandwich, and was, I want to say like 3 or 4 burgers stacked up with hot dogs, and instead of buns, it was grilled cheese sandwiches on the top and the bottom, and it had like chili and egg. And I didn't even make it like a quarter of the way through this thing. I felt like I was gonna just throw up. It was awful. Somewhere's a picture, and I'm determined to go through my catalog of pictures and find this, because like you, I took a lot of pictures, and I probably have like 30 or 40,000 photos on my Google Photos. I need to just find this thing and share it, because this thing is it's a mess. I don't know. You ever take anything on that's like 4 pounds?
Well, I had a history of making a Thanksgiving dinner for myself.
Right.
Where I would make a 6 to 8 pound turkey and probably anywhere from 8 to 12 side dishes and 2 or 3 pies. And I would eat the whole thing in one night.
That's insane.
So I like, this is the funny thing. Like I literally would say, I'm not a sprint eater.
Right.
So I'm not going to do 40 hot dogs in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But if you want me to eat 40 hot dogs in 2 hours, I'll do it. So I used to say I was a long distance eater.
I like it. It's a nice play on words.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would always go for the fast, quick, because I knew that like by the time I was done, I was going to feel like crap, and it didn't matter because I was still going to do it the next day and the next day. But like I'd sit around and watch True TV and slam a 7-Eleven pizza, which is not even that good, but it was $5. I got sent home from work one day at my last job before the one I have now, and I was just so pissed off and bitter that I went to 7-Eleven, and it was like 11:30 in the morning, and I bought a $5 pizza. I had to make it fresh, which is surprisingly, it's a lot better that way than it is when it's been sitting there. Shocker. And so I took this thing home and just sat around and watched True TV, like Full Throttle Saloon or Hardcore Pawn or some shit like that, and I would just eat this whole thing in probably about 15 to 20 minutes. It was sickening. Now that I think about it.
Oh, I there's a local pizza place here that does like the New York style pizzas that are gigantic, like much bigger than a regular large. And I'd get a whole large probably 3 or 4 times a week. So they had a loyalty card that once you got 6 pizzas, you got another one free. And I was filling those cards left and right. So like they would give me extra punches because they knew I was coming back. And they also were good with usually on Wednesday nights, because that was one of the nights that I host trivia, and I did it late that night. Like it'd always be like 11:30 when I was leaving, and that was like a half hour before they closed. And I would basically go in and they sold all different kinds of pizza by the slice. And I'd go in and pay for like 4 or 5 slices.
Wow.
And I'd get home and get my box, and there probably would be, and these are like the plate size, like New York style pizza slices.
Yep.
I would get home and have twice that easy in there, because they would just basically be like, whatever they got left, start shoveling in the box, because they knew I'd want it.
Oh, man.
So it's one of those things where like you become known. So I knew when I go in there, I could go in there and get extra food, or even times when I would take like a month off kind of eating bad and try to attempt to diet and fail, I'd come back and they would be like, "Oh, you're back. We miss you." Like it's, and in a way it feels good. In a way you're known at the pizza place as the guy that comes in and gets pizzas almost. Yeah. Okay. Think about that. Think about what that means.
You've got a reputation, Mike. Or you had a reputation at that time.
Oh, for sure.
Well, here's what you're known for now, by the way. You started at 540 pounds and you're down to 254 pounds. Holy shit, dude. Like that's insane.
It is. It's 540 was my heaviest ever.
Yeah.
Indeed. And so it's a whole new world.
Oh my really God.
Yeah.
That is astonishing. Before we get too deep into that, let's go back even further, way back. Now we're going to go way back. And this is going to drop on a Wednesday, so it'll be way back Wednesday #. But when you go back to like your childhood and all that stuff, you start getting big at that point? Like as far as like, did it come later, like teenage years? Was it in your early childhood? When did you become the big guy? I know for me it was like elementary school.
Yeah, it was early elementary school for me. Very early, probably like, I was chubby at like 2 and 3. And then by like 4 and 5, I was probably officially fat. And I think I crossed well into the 200s for the first time when I was 9 or 10.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the first time my family put me on a diet, was around then. But yeah, no, I was a very, very, very big kid. I also developed, I'm very good at dieting. I'm very good at gaining weight. I'm not great at the in between times.
Right.
So I lost a ton of weight, and then we moved, and a lot of things were going on in my family, and I quickly regained it. And around the time I was 16 was when I was pushing 350 for the first time.
Oh yeah, it's a heavy weight right there.
Mm-hmm. And another round of dieting, and another round of gaining, and kind of heading into college and adulthood. And that was kind of when, as soon as I was out on my own and in college, and kind of things went further and further off the rails in terms of like my size and my eating, and there wasn't anyone around anymore to comment on it. So it was able for it to easily kind of get out of control. And so it was post college that I was already over 300 when I left college, and very quickly was over 400. And a few years after that was over 500. I was over 500 probably for like 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty solidly.
And that's the interesting thing too. Like when you talk about, going on the diet and gaining back, it always seems like when you gain it back even more than you had before. And that's the craziest part to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because you kind of roll back into the old habits. And as you roll into the old habits, because I think it's kind of like, and I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, but I know for me, it was like, you you get on a diet, and then for whatever reason it stops. Maybe something happens in the family, or something happens with you mentally. You're just not there, and you just give up. And then you're like, well, screw it. I mean, I'm already a screw up. So you start rolling into the bad habits. And as you go into bad habits, you really just start to care less and less and less. And then it kind of just gradually gets worse, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I was very, and for me, every time I would go off and get back into that cycle of regaining, it was reinforcing that you're meant to be a fat guy. This is who you're meant to be. So why are you even trying to change this?
Right.
And let's just reinforce those bad behaviors and reinforce those choices and make them easier. I was my own best enabler.
Yeah,
for sure. And so yeah, I think I have a couple periods there where I think I might have even broke some records for the rate of regain as well.
Yeah, it's I know, like at one point I thought that I was just, not only was I accepting being big, but I almost kind of embraced it for a while. Like for me, it was always like, yeah, sometimes I see these people, they're big on TV. They become like bodyguards for famous people. And when you watch like maybe reality shows, they're like revered, like, wow, you're so cool. Like, oh, that's my big guy right there. He's cool. And for a while I was like so content. I'm like, yeah, I could be that guy. Who knows? Maybe I'll become somebody's bodyguard and get to hang out with them and be on TV and get rich or whatever. But in reality, that is not how it went down. In reality, there's a lot of, there's a lot of pain. You wake up every day and you're just in pain and all kinds of crap,
Oh, it's amazing the things that the human brain can look past in order to feed that behavior and keep things coming. Like when you're that severely kind of entrenched in food.
Oh, definitely.
You'll deal with, the pain, the physical ailments, all of those things that can add up, and you're still like, I feel like I had convinced myself that I was just meant to be the big guy. That's who I was. That's why I defined myself in every social circle I ran in. That was or anything that I wasn't shy or ashamed of. It was something I wholeheartedly embraced. And I think I had honestly embraced the idea that I would die young.
Really?
That it was going to kill me, so I might as well enjoy the ride, because no matter what I did to fight it, I wasn't winning. So why fight it? Why worry? When instead, just kind of close your eyes to everything that's actually happening. And it took some things happening in my family a couple of years ago for me to kind of wake up and be like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
Because I am pretty open on my Instagram talking about the fact that I believe I was killing myself with food slowly.
Yep.
It's not as fast as with a gun or with poison, but I was doing it. I knew I was, and that's one of the things I think is different sometimes when I talk to people. And I talk to a ton of people who say, you know, I've never lost weight and I don't know what to do. And I've never even thought about this and I don't know what to do. And I don't know what foods are good or foods are bad or anything along those lines. I was never unaware. I was never, I never lived in ignorance of what the food was doing.
Right.
I never had that time where I could just say, oh, well, this is probably fine. You know, I see other people eating that. You know, I see skinnier people eating this, so it must be fine.
Yeah.
I knew the effect of everything going into my body, especially the more I get into, you know, losing and failing. I knew I'm an avid reader. I'm an avid researcher. Like I knew the science behind foods. I knew the science behind how they affect your body. And that's also why I think there's a part of me. I mean, I hid from doctors for a very, very long time. That's a part of my story I'm definitely not, you know, proud of.
Right.
But I could tell what was going on. You know, I could tell what the different things that my body was doing meant, you know, and what was happening. And I feel like I lived for decades in like a triage state of just keeping myself alive to eat more.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
you live for it.
knowing that it wasn't going to last forever. And I was okay with that. I mean, I honestly didn't think, I would say that a couple of years ago, I would say I knew I wasn't going to live to see 50 easy.
Yeah.
And I had almost made peace with it. And I think that was probably one of the scariest parts of it all, was that I had made peace with it, like truly made peace with it. It wasn't just an ignorance thing. It was something where I'd sat down with myself. And I mean, I had a moment 2 years ago, right before I started this path that I'm on now, where I was writing a letter to keep by the side of my bed. So if I didn't wake up in the morning and people found it, basically the letter was saying, you know, I lived a good life. Don't be sad.
Wow.
You know, I and writing that also, you know, was a big part of kind of waking me up.
Yeah.
And being like, you know, what on earth do you do? Like, really? Do you mean all of this? Or is this just another way of trying to put up that facade so that I try to please other people, but don't really worry about what's happening to myself?
Yeah, I mean that's some pretty deep stuff when you got a letter there that's kind of preparing people for what you feel is the inevitable. Mm-hmm. You know, in other words, you've already flown off the tracks and you're free falling in a way, and you're just wondering, okay, when do I splat on the ground? When does that moment come where it's just right on the ground? And that, I mean, that's insane right there. You know, I think for me, the baddest it ever got was I damn near died in 2014, and it was like 2 years and some change later, and I still hadn't woken up, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, if death itself isn't going to scare me straight, I don't know what will. But
for sure,
I think you come to a point where you just got to be ready, like, you know, in your heart, I'm ready to really put an honest effort, right? I mean, is that accurate for your situation? Was it just you had a moment and you knew at this time it was the time to give it the honest try?
I do, because I knew what to do.
Right.
In 2012, 2013, that was when one of my major, I got down to 210 pounds in 2013. And that was, I like to say that it started off with the poverty diet, because through circumstances and moving and losing work and things along those lines, I just didn't have the money for food. So I started to drop some weight naturally to get me out of the 500s. And I still, I mean, I went down lower, and when, you know, as soon as I had work again, I went right back up into the high 400s. But I knew then what to do to lose weight. I obviously took my body from like 480, 490 down to 210 pounds. I didn't do any of the mental work. I didn't, you know, there's a lot to it there that I didn't, because I was trying to avoid it. Like, I still lived with the idea in my head that I was the big guy, and I was locking him away. And had just basically compartmentalized myself. And so I knew what to do to lose weight. But it was May of 2013, I was 210 pounds. And by October of 2013, I had gone off the rails again, and I was 480 pounds.
Wow.
So I had gained 270 pounds in just under 6 months. And to be honest with you, when I think about it now, I have no idea how I survived that. Like and I don't joke about that. I very seriously say, like, it should have killed me. It should have. The weird things that happen to your body when you're gaining weight that rapidly. I put on 100 pounds within the first month.
Wow.
I put on 30 pounds the first weekend. I started binging again. So I went right back to that, living the life of being the big guy. And that was when I think it went from being something that was gleeful to, somber acceptance of, well, this is what's going to happen. This is the path you're on. I have some friends that I used to joke with and say, get your hammers ready because you're going to need to do a wall breaking party someday for me to get me out of my apartment.
Right.
And we joke about that. Like it was not something we hit. It was kind of that thing where you're joking and laughing about it, but we're all seriously saying, okay, this is probably going to happen. And it was 2 years ago, I had some situations happen in my family involving children and people not being able to care for them, and my parents getting involved with caring for them.
Right.
And my parents basically coming to the rest of us and saying, we're going to need your help someday with this. Like, not just need your help, like cheer us on and babysit now and then. Like, we're going to literally need your help. And I didn't feel pressure from that. I kind of went and had an epiphany of, there are people outside of myself that need me to be alive. And they need me to not just be alive, but to be able to move and to be active. Because I was existing for years.
Oh, yeah.
A bump on a log exists, a lump of clay exists. But I knew, and that was when I opened that door in my head to realize, okay, how much of my life was I giving up just so I could eat? What was I allowing myself not to do? What was I shutting down? What opportunities in my career had I, passed over the years, and in my personal life and things along those lines? Because this was that driving force. The driving force was to eat more and just live the big guy, live the life as the big guy.
Yeah.
And so when I came around to make that decision 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years to like this month, it was because I realized that I wanted to. I didn't just feel like I needed to live. I realized that I want to live, and I need to start saying that to myself more.
Right.
And that kind of became my mantra. I want to live. Why are you doing this? I want to live. And people are like, well, yeah, and I'm like, no, I'm not joking. I'm like, I was killing myself with food. I was literally dying. I want to live, so this is what I need to do to live. And that's, still a driving force in me today, to think about knowing how quickly, and especially knowing what I went through with that rapid regain, in 6 months, I could be right back where I was 2 years ago.
Definitely.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that for a second. And so it's about vigilance and having to kind of keep that why constantly in my head and keep reminding myself. And so I post about it, and I post about it, and I post about it, because I need to keep it alive. I need to keep it alive to keep myself alive.
You said something so key a little bit back there about how you're just existing. And one of the things I try to hammer home on this podcast is we get one shot here. We get one shot to be living on this earth. It was nearly taken from me. At any point, it could have been taken from you, and still it can be taken from any one of us. And whether that's weight loss or other things that are passionate, that you're passionate about, to sit around and just exist and just wake up every day and you do the same shit and you're just doing whatever and you're just wasting away. I mean, this can all be gone tomorrow. We can record this right now, and there's a chance no one will ever hear it, because tomorrow I could not wake up, not even have a chance to edit this, post this, and no one will even hear it, because at any moment this could just be taken with the snap of a finger. And it blows me away how much we take that for granted. I think now, with the experiences we've been through, we have a better perspective on it, and we definitely take a little bit more chances and try to live it up a little bit more. But it just amazes me how many years go by, how many more years got to go by until we as people wake up and start living and not just existing.
Oh, for sure. I'm right there with you. It makes complete sense.
Yeah. So, I mean,
completely.
when you got started on this particular journey 2 years ago now, how did, do you set out like a plan to yourself? Obviously you had mentioned, what to do. What is that? Like, you set a battle plan. You're like, all right, I'm going to start doing this. Sure. I'm going to go on this diet. Like, kind of talk about that very beginning and building out that blueprint of yours.
Definitely. And I think one of the things that I learned over the years was what worked for me and what didn't work for me in terms of being able to try to alleviate that desperate hunger, the cravings, whether they're physical or mental or whatever they are,
Right.
they exist. And at that point there was no distinction inside of me. It was just something that was there. So I needed to think about, okay, what do I do that helps me take some of that pressure off so that I can try to focus on taking more steps forward. And I know for me, that's always been something within like the low carb sphere, something within the paleo sphere,
Yeah.
eating natural foods, but also cutting back carbs, cutting out, the big ones that used to drive my life, breads, pastries, cookies, candies, all of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so I had done low carb diets many times. I had done paleo pretty successfully for a long time. And in the middle, like while I was still regaining the weight and holding on, living at, 470, 480, I was still researching. I was still kind of paying attention to what was big and what trends were coming and going and what people were doing and what were people having success with. And I stumbled upon a couple different resources in the keto community, which was not even as big as it is now 2 years ago. But some of the kind of standout people, specifically, the research and writing of Gary Taubes, Jimmy Moore's many podcasts and books, specifically his Keto Clarity book. And I'm the kind of guy that I love having something to try and a challenge and something new and something that also bit of scientific medical formula to it. That's the kind of stuff that can drive me. So that idea of tracking carbs and counting carbs and that kind of thing appealed to me. So I decided that I was going to give keto a try and just see what happened. And I started with, I guess, what now people would call like a lazy keto approach. It didn't feel lazy to me then,
right?
Because I'm eliminating so many of the foods that I'm eating.
Yeah.
But lazy keto in that I really didn't start with like counting my calories or even counting my protein or fat grams. I just started with saying, okay, I'm going to pay attention to the carbs that I eat. I'm going to eat less than 25 net carbs a day, and I'm going to eat fat and protein until I'm satiated. I still have that energy, so that I'm not, starving all the time or feeling deprived. And I started doing that. And then I at that point, my exercise, I could barely walk for 5 minutes, February of 2017. So the idea of joining a gym or anything along those lines was like, wait a minute, you need to be able to walk in from your car before you can walk into a gym.
Definitely.
So what are you going to start with? So I literally started with 5 minutes of walking a day. And that 5 minutes at first was from the front steps of my apartment to basically about a block and a half. And that would take me about 3 minutes. And I would turn around and I would struggle to get back to the stairs and then sit on the stairs for another half hour just to catch my breath and calm down from doing it. But I started doing that regularly because I knew, as much as I knew scientifically and everything along those lines, we especially as overweight humans don't work out enough to balance like a bad diet, like in terms of outworking a bad diet.
Oh yeah.
But I knew my body was in such bad shape that it needed to move. I knew the way my legs would swell like water balloons at the end of the day was not good. I knew the fact that they would tear and leak was not good.
Yeah.
But I wasn't at a point then that I was willing to talk to a doctor about it. So I had to do something. So I knew body was something I had to do. So I just started slowly incorporating more and more exercise. After about a month and a half, I had dropped a significant amount of weight. And that was when I started going into the gym and had to figure out which treadmills I could use.
Yep.
Because a lot of the equipment, at my local Planet Fitness wasn't meant for someone my size. I remember trying to get right onto some machines to do some light lifting and not physically being able to fit my body into the machines.
Yeah.
Like my stomach in front of me preventing me from doing like pull downs and rowing because the pads didn't go far enough forward for me to be able to still sit on the bench and use the machine. So it was this period of trial and error. And I started with like 10 minutes on the treadmill and I would do 10 minutes and it would kill me. And I got that up to a half. By then I was getting better with, figuring out the machines that I could use and start doing some lifting and incorporating that. And I found that keto was giving me some relief. Eating that way was giving me some relief from the mental side of everything, so that I could keep focusing and keep going forward. So
what was it about? What was it about the keto that put you at ease?
Well, two things, I think. One, I think for someone with a physical, a true kind of physical addiction to carbohydrates, by taking them away, going cold turkey as it was, it starts to alleviate some of that hunger response. We can get into the hormones and all of that, but it started to allow me to think a little more rationally about what I was eating and what food I was putting into my body. I'm also someone that loves to cook. In another life, I had to have been a chef. And if I ever had the physical stamina to do it, I would consider even making a career change now to do it. So I loved the idea of the challenge of making interesting, tasty food with fewer ingredients than I would normally have on the palate,
right?
To paint with. So I think that side of it also was very attractive to me. Also, I always was someone who liked, meat and bacon and chicken and all of those things, and the protein side of things was something that always appealed to me. When I was, drawing energy from that food, that was a good thing. So I think that keto said, have those, enjoy those things, and I incorporated the paleo side of it. I always look for well-sourced proteins and very much into finding local farms and the farmers market. And, can I find somewhere that sells grass-fed this or pastured that or whatever it is? So I think the idea that it kind of pushed me to think about what was actually in my food.
Right.
Whereas in the past, when I had done diets that were more like if it's your macros, but don't worry about the ingredients type plans, specifically like the original Weight Watchers I did many, many years ago and things along those lines. Like it was more about how can I fit the bad foods into the box, the foods that keep that hunger alive for me. Whereas now I was able to start to find foods that actually satiated me and gave me some relief. And there were still many, many, many nights that I wouldn't white knuckle through, finish your eating for the day and determine that it's time to go to bed early, because if you stay up, you're going to probably eat something.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Make those choices, figure out ways to make it all work. And I did that for as long as it kept moving me forward, like staying in that vein. And I would refine it and keep reading new things and looking, especially like through Instagram, like what are different things people are trying and what are different challenges they're doing. And there's a very kind of active community talking about that sort of stuff. So it was easy for me to find new products and find new recipes. And when I first did low carb, I think there probably were like 2 websites that had low carb recipes. And now, you can throw a stick and hit a low carb recipe, like no matter where you're from, sitting at home at your desk. Like, if I were to yell out into my apartment building hallway, who's got a low carb recipe? 15 people would come walking out of apartments. Well, I was trying this the other day. So I think it was becoming a wider sphere. Like when I remember like in 2011, 2012, 2013, like trying to find coconut oil. Trying to find coconut oil 6 or 7 years ago. There was one brand of it sold in the area. It was at Whole Foods. It was probably $20 a jar. And that was it. There was no other options. There was no other place to get it. There weren't 17 brands on Amazon or anything like that. And now, basic supermarkets have 4 different kinds of coconut oil. And it's just amazing to me the proliferation of the ingredients that people use, specifically in the keto sphere, but also in the paleo sphere. And now that you can find them better and you can find them easier, and there's whole sections of supermarkets devoted to those ingredients. And I think that finding that out, that it was more readily accessible, also was something that, made it easier for me, because I could start going into some of the thriftier stores and finding things on sale and, seeing brands that I see people spending a ton of money on, like for a discount. And it's always good to be a bargain shopper, I think, especially when you're dieting. And then also on the flip side of it all, like I have a lot of people all the time that message me and say, you spend so much on your food, you're ordering from X, Y, and Z, and you're getting this. Like, they don't understand, I think, how much I used to actually spend on food when I was heavier.
Oh my God.
The fact that I used to drop probably easily $125 to $150 on fast food alone every week, in addition to $250 of grocery shopping. So if I spend $200 a week now I'm still saving $300 a week over what I used to spend.
Yeah,
Like,
there's no question about that.
I easily used to spend 85 to 90% of my income on food, easily.
Oh man, I've been
So
there.
it's not that high a percent. It's not. I'm sure you have, my man. It's not that high of a percentage now, so it becomes a little easier for me. I think I eat less, so it's just easier to do. But that I found that keto brought to me, and I know it doesn't for everyone, and I know people that do it and have the struggles don't go away, but it brought to me a peace with food that I never felt in my life. An ability to look at food objectively. And that's something that I just cherish.
No, I think that's great to hear that you've found so much success with it and you've come to peace with it. One of the things, I mean, since you're very much involved with it, I don't know enough about keto to be any sort of a authoritative opinion on it. However, just going off different posts that you see on Instagram, it seems to me the general consensus is that people either really love it or they really hate it. And being that you're so entrenched in that community, maybe you can shed some light for listeners that maybe have seen some of that going on and maybe also aren't very educated on it, and maybe kind of shed some light into why there are, number one, people that are so strongly one way or the other, and then two, why you think there is some negative vibes about it. What is it maybe that turns people off from it?
Definitely. Well, one, I think the popular image of keto is that you're eating bacon and eggs with butter on them all day.
Yeah, what's not to love there, right?
And I think it is. I mean, and so I think that's attractive to some people to think about, well, I can do that to lose weight. But I think people get a little wrapped up in, the fact that it's the same way. Like I have friends that are vegan, and you every so often hear someone say, well, Oreos are vegan.
Right.
It's like, okay, great, they are. But are they good for you to eat? And it's the same way with some keto foods. Like, yes, X, Y, and Z can be keto. Almost any food can be keto if you portion it properly. But is it good for your body to eat? And I think people get wrapped up in seeing the people that throw out there, the fact that they're putting this food in their bodies that might be helping them lose weight, but might not be doing some great things to their bodies. So it's very easy to have a strong reaction to that. And I think it's also very easy to get zealously behind keto and be blind to the fact that you're making some choices that aren't probably the best for your body in the long run.
Sure.
If you're eating foods that are still quote unquote, empty calories, are empty foods that are created in laboratories to resemble the foods that you used to have trouble controlling. But now the carb level is lower, you consider it a healthy food for you. And I think those foods can be great and can help some people transition to using a healthier way of, a healthier way of eating. But I think it's easy for some people to get wrapped up in, and then you see people, I see accounts all the time, accounts that I really like that drive me wild or drive me insane because they're posting new desserts every day, that they're making and creating these and they eat them all the time. And I'm like, how are you eating these desserts every day and having any kind of good results? And I know some of them we all talk about, we don't show 100% of our lives on social media. So just because it looks like someone is eating that constantly and eating a giant plate of it, they're probably really not. But I think that becomes the image out there to some people, the fact that someone's eating, keto cookies and bacon all day long, instead of the fact that they're probably really eating, some eggs with greens in the morning and something else with some vegetables in the afternoon, or even if they're carnivore, they're eating, clean meats and things along those lines. Like, I think we don't always see it from everyone. So I think it's very easy to kind of wrap your head around thinking, well, these people are just, and it also, and I don't know if I'm really articulating this the best, but I think there's a lot to be said out there about where research comes from, where guidelines come from,
right?
What do the studies actually mean? What do they actually show? So for me, I like to try to read into and find out where the actual science behind things comes from, instead of just accepting that something is true or not true. And I think we've all been taught a lot of things. And so a lot of times the foods that people are eating on a keto diet are not the foods that people quote unquote think of traditionally as healthy.
Right.
And I feel like we're gonna have to call this a quote unquote episode. So
take a drink of water every time he says that.
I know, right? Exactly. I think it's very easy to think, wow, I'm watching this person eat this food that I've always been told is going to kill me. So even if they're looking great and they're feeling great, there's something wrong going on with them. There has to be, because this is what I've been told by the mainstream culture and by the medical establishment and by the government for years.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go off on the government's out to get us kind of tangent or anything on those lines, but I think, I definitely know we're not having that kind of discussion.
Sure.
But I think it's very easy for people to pick a horse in the race and stick with that horse. And I think people do it on both sides of the issue. I think there are also keto people that refuse to accept that maybe they're making some choices that aren't the greatest for themselves, and they might need to think about those at some point down the line. And I get into that sometimes with some people who are like, well, just do, like, when I'll say like, oh, I miss keto ice cream, having keto ice cream. Well, just have some, just do this, start counting, because right now for me, I count total carbs, not net carbs, as a part of the program I'm doing.
Right.
And there are some people that they just can't get their minds beyond that, because like, well, net carbs are the way to go, and this is the philosophy you have to use. And I'm like, well, I was using that and it wasn't working for me anymore. And so I found something that is working for me. And I think what's essential is that we start to see ourselves as kind of experiments of one, that whole idea of the N=1 experiment, and find what works for yourself. And we worry too much about other people. We worry too much about controlling other people and worrying about how people respond. And I think like one of the things that I've really come into over the past 2 years as well is Stoic philosophy and Stoicism, and the idea that I can only control myself. And that very much reflects what you were saying too about the idea that we could die at any minute.
Yeah.
And so, the Stoic idea of memento mori, we could die, you're going to die. And how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your last moment to be? Do you want it to be making good choices, or do you want it to be making bad choices? And as I've become more focused on myself, it's easier to let go of what other people are doing. So if someone gets in my face mad about they hate keto, I'm usually like, well, that's great. It's great for me though. It's helping me. Even today, someone, I tend to most days have a bulletproof or a fatty coffee. And I had someone who I like and get along with, basically say, I still can't believe that you drink that, because it's not helping you and it's not doing this and it's proven to do this and it's proven to do that.
Oh boy.
And I said, thank you so much for your opinion, but since I've started doing it, this is what's happened for me, X, Y, and Z. So as long as this is working for me, I'm going to do it. If it stops working for me, I'll stop doing it. And I think that's the other piece, that we sometimes get so tied into like everything has to be a certain way, right, that we forget that you can make changes and you can make deviations and you can build a plan of your own. And you have to. And I think that's the key to sustainability, especially in weight loss, is realizing that you're not always just about checking off boxes on a sheet, but you're defining for yourself what your plan means and what your program means, and you're reevaluating, and you're looking at what kind of results you're getting, and you're looking at how it's making you feel, and all of that, so that you're able to build something that's sustainable and livable forever. And that's the other argument against keto is, the unsustainability, because my goodness, how could you live without cake for the rest of your life?
Oh my God.
And my response is always, I have eaten enough cake for 10 very large people's lifetimes. Trust me. I used to buy sheet cakes and have them write happy birthday to me on them, take it home and eat it alone. Don't tell me I'm missing cake. Don't tell me I'm missing candy. I've had my fair share of it all. I have had enough. And do I miss it? Of course I do.
Sure.
But do I miss it enough to put myself back in that position of dying again? No way on earth.
I wish you could have seen me standing here fist pumping, throwing my hands to the sky, just in agreement. I was having a similar conversation with Daryl on, he and I started doing this Monday, like 10-minute quick hit podcast. And I was talking about how I had not been to the gym in over a month now, because I had been doing the yoga, and just the thought of like, if this was let's just call him the average weight loss person, we won't put a name on him, but just the average weight loss person that lives and dies by the scale, that is doing things like diet bets where they're just putting unrealistic expectations on themselves and then having mental struggles because they didn't succeed on something that is for the most part out of their control, how if they heard, what I've done, that would have just made their eyes roll back in their head. Their head would have spun because, oh my God, you didn't go to the gym for a month. Oh my God. But here's the thing. When you don't live and die by the scale and these other things that are just unrealistic results, and you just say, you know what, I'm living my life. I'm waking up one day after the next, after the next, after the next. And I'm not in a damn hurry. I'm just taking my time and I'm figuring out, I'm tweaking just like you did, finding these things that work for me. If this didn't work, guess what? Next week it's gone. I'm going to make sure I give it a week, make sure it's working. And you just keep trying and tasting and figuring things out. Man, that's the key to success. When you really make it your own, as opposed to
for sure
going to a standard. And so when I heard you say it, I jumped up out of my seat. I wish this was a visual, but I just jumped up out of my seat and like, preach, Brother Gorman, preach.
Indeed.
Oh my goodness, man, we're just, I feel like we're having a fire conversation here. And I'm not afraid to say it. I feel like we're just, like you said, we may have different ways of going about it. You may be keto and I'm just whatever the hell I'm on. I'm on like some custom shit, but like,
sure.
We have similar ideals and we can come together and have this, just honest discussion about, where we think, things are going. And I think this is great.
For sure. Definitely. And I think that really is about, and that's how you keep your fire going. Like, find those discussions and find those people to push back on you and say, well, what are you doing? And it doesn't mean that you're judging someone for asking them what they're doing. It's, you just want to know, you want to help them know, it's good to know, because sometimes we don't know what we're doing and sometimes we don't know what direction we're taking. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay. But I also know for me that those are the times that it's easy for the old patterns to start to come back in, because I start to see, well, if I'm not on this road, what road am I on? And maybe I'll take that road that runs by a bakery. So when someone says to me, so what are you doing this week? How is this going? And, I've been working with a coach now for a couple months. And I think having that person who's checking in with me, that accountability has been priceless for me. Like, it truly has. I think just having someone who just says, where's your mind at this week? What's your mindset? What are you working on? What are your challenges? And thinking about those things, because it's when you stop asking those questions and you start feeling comfortable that I think the problems start, at least for me. At least for me. I know when I start to pretend that everything's okay, everything is definitely not okay.
Yeah. I don't like to be too comfortable. You want to be a little comfortable, but not too comfortable.
Right. I want to feel good about what I'm doing, and I want to feel good every day. And I want to be happy with what I'm doing, but I don't want to be comfortable to the point that I say, oh, well, it's on autopilot now, and I don't have to think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Because for me, when I stop thinking about it is when I realize that there's an extra tablespoon of X, Y, and Z going in, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. And next thing you know, I'm like, well, I've already gained 20 pounds back, so why worry anymore? And that's I admire so much the people that catch themselves. I see people all the time posting and saying, I had a rough month and a half, and I put on 10 pounds, and I'm back at it. And I admire that, so much, because I know for me, especially in the past, instead of thinking, okay, I need to get back at it, my brain process would be, well, you screwed up and you're going to screw up more. So why don't we just for today do this? And I'm amazing. I have this incredible voice inside of me that can convince myself to do anything. When I went off, last time I went off the rails severely, it was because I decided to do one cheat meal because I had a cold. And I had gone to Whole Foods to buy chicken and rice. And then that planning of one cheat meal turned into a cheat day. And then it was going to be a cheat weekend. And by the time I got driving home from the store, I'd already hit a fast food place, decided I was ordering pizza later that night, and that I was taking a week off. By the time that weekend was over, I had thrown the diet away completely, because it was easy to allow myself to slip down that slope. It's an incredibly slippery road for me. And I know what happens. I know what it means. And I think the fact that now I strive to be vigilant and pay attention to those behaviors is what's helping me, and what helps me realize that I won't go down that path. I've had people say, like, well, when are you going to cheat? Like, are you going to do this? When's your next cheat meal? When are you going to do something along those lines? And I'm like, I know me. I don't trust me. I can plan out right now I could sit here with you on this podcast and say, okay, Gary, we're going to talk about, this weekend I'm going to have a cheat meal on Saturday, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to control it and weigh it, and it's going to be perfect. And I know in my head, it's that old voice going, okay, we got the door open. He's going to do this. And as soon as he does it, let's remind him how good this feels. And I need all you endorphins to pump, and I need you guys to be on board with this, because all we need to do is push into the next morning. And if we can get him up the next morning, he's going to go get donuts. It's so easy for me, and I think it's easy for other people too. And it's not something we all want to admit, how easy it is for us to close those doors. And I think the fact that, like I said, I'm very aware of my behavior, I think is sometimes why it was easy for me to slip back into old patterns, because I could rationally, logically convince myself that it was time to change again, that I've been doing the good stuff long enough, and I can't let that happen this time. I don't want to.
No, I agree, man. You're doing amazing. And speaking of which, here's a fun one. When you look back, when you were over 500 and now where you're at now, like what's one thing now that you could do that you couldn't do back then? Like rather for me, like it was like riding roller coasters. Like what's something fun now that you're able to do that you weren't able to do before?
Yeah. So, this is I think this is it may not necessarily be the fun answer you're thinking about, but this is something that really struck me today.
Hit me.
Without thinking about it now, and this, again, I apologize to people that this veers into TMI territory. Without thinking about it now, I can pee standing up.
No kidding.
And I never could before. I haven't been able to for decades. Just physically, the way my body was affected by the weight that I put on and the weight I carried.
Right.
And even stamina wise and everything along those lines. But literally, physically, the way my body was deformed by my weight, I couldn't pee standing up without making a huge mess. And I can do it now.
Hell yeah, man.
And it's insanely, and it's silly, but it's insanely freeing to know that I don't have to, like, if I'm out, like I'll still go out with friends, and like I don't drink anymore really. If I'm hanging out at a bar and I'm going to have, a couple soda waters or just some water or something.
Right.
And when I go to the bathroom, we all know the condition that bar bathrooms can be in.
Oh God. Yeah.
You don't want to be dropping your pants, because when you pull your pants back up, who knows what you got on your pants.
Yeah.
So I can go. And so there were many times that I would just leave when I had to go to the bath. I knew I would time my night so that when I needed to go to the bathroom, I would just go home.
Yeah.
Because I wanted no part of like having a mess happen or something along those lines. And now I don't have to worry about, because I've even had moments where, like, doing things outdoors and things along those lines, again, TMI.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone to the bathroom outside. I hadn't gone to the bathroom outside since I was a kid. And
wow.
Yes, adults should not regularly be going to the bathroom outside, but sometimes when you're in the woods or somewhere like that, it happens.
Sure.
And for me now, and I think that for me is the biggest change, is you don't realize how much space in your head worrying about things like that takes up.
Yeah.
So taking that worry away, like now I don't have to worry about chairs working. I can sit in any chair with or without arms now. That's a whole new universe opens up to you. I don't have to worry about what restaurants or places I go to with friends and family, because I know I'm going to be able to sit somewhere. When you can't know you're going to sit somewhere, that anxiety can build up in you for days before you do something and be paralyzing.
100%.
And I think, and like you were saying, like amusement parks, like my amusement park experience was always Disney World or Disneyland, because they're very big, people friendly. And that's one thing I would say to people when they're like, I go to Disneyland with my kids and I don't go on the rides. I'm like, I was 540 pounds using a scooter, could barely stand, and I went on 90% of the rides at Disney. Don't worry about Disney. But it's those other places like Universal and Six Flags and all of that I haven't been to since I was in the beginning of high school, because I knew I wasn't going to fit on rides, or I couldn't walk far enough to walk around a park.
Right.
And so that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to this summer, obviously. But knowing that I don't have to worry about planning things along those lines, like planning things so that I have to accommodate, can I physically get myself somewhere, and can I fit in that space when I get there? I don't have to think about that anymore. I went to a theater this past weekend to see Patton Oswalt with some friends, and I knew it was an old theater, and I knew the seats were going to be very tiny, but I had no fear. And I sat down in the seat, and I was perfectly fine. And I think there's something so freeing about that you literally, that becomes almost like the drug,
Right.
knowing that you can live this life now that isn't encumbered by having to spend so much of your mental energy planning anymore, I think is just, it's wonderful. It literally is wonderful. And I know that, we throw around the word wonderful sometimes, but it is. It's an amazing, amazing feeling.
Definitely. I agree 100%. Now, this has been a great past hour. I always can never believe how fast an hour goes by, and it
sure.
Yeah, and it becomes time to start wrapping it up. But what I like to end these things on, always on a positive vibe, is like when you're looking a couple of years ahead, 3, 5, 10 years ahead, like what are some of the goals now? You've seen so much success, you've kicked so much ass with your weight loss. I mean, dude, you look amazing now, but like when you think about the goals in the next 3, 5+ years, what's some of the things you're working on? What do you hope to be doing in those next couple of years?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing that goes back to my motivation is I'm going to be alive.
Yep.
And I think that's fantastic. My 46th birthday is this year, so I'm as old as dirt already.
What the hell? You don't even look 40.
I know. I get that a lot.
I'm 36.
That doesn't crack thing, I think.
I'm 36, and like I hope this doesn't offend you, but like I feel like you look more like your mid 30s, honestly.
No, it doesn't offend me at all. I like hearing that.
Yeah.
I wish it were true.
I hope I look half as good as you at 46. Jesus Christ.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the big things, like I want to be able to ride roller coasters again at any amusement park and not worry about that. Specifically, I want to be able to get on the Pandora ride at Animal Kingdom at Disney. That's a ride that's notorious for being painful for people, and most people just don't fit, even if you're just a little too tall, or the body dimensions needed for that ride are very specific. So the Harry Potter rides at Universal are things I really want to do. So there's some things there. I'm very much looking forward to this year flying in one plane seat. I haven't done that in a long, long time. I'm going to be taking some direct flights for some travel I have planned this year. And I was never able to get the airline that did direct flights because I just couldn't fit in one seat and have a policy that fit with my budget. So I was a Southwest guy for decades.
Sure.
So I look forward to being able to travel. It's a bucket list for me is to go to Ireland, which is my ancestry. But the idea that I can fly across the ocean in a plane and be comfortable, the idea that when I get there, I can stay wherever I need to and walk and travel, and you're a bit smaller than America when it comes to accommodations and things along those lines. And I know that at 480 pounds that I wasn't going to do that. And some people do it, and I respect the hell out of them for doing that. But I knew for me it wasn't going to happen. So traveling the world is something I would really, really love to do. And I just would like to see, I want to just take the opportunities that are put before me and not have to worry about whether I can or can't do something, and be saying some more yeses. Like I haven't gone camping since I was a small child. And I've always just told people I hated nature. You have to build up these parts of you where you become 100% convinced that you hate something so that people will believe it. And so I've always, whenever anyone put the opportunities in front of me to do it, instead of saying, I'm afraid that you'll have to help me off of the ground if I sleep on the ground, and you won't be able to do that. So I want to go camping. I would love to go camping and hiking and explore some of those, do some more physical things and not be afraid to do physical things. I also have a little bit of a fun thing I want to do. I've always wanted to do the zip line in Vegas. Fly. And I think 300 pounds or 275 is the weight limit on it. I can't remember, but I would like to be well under the weight limit because definitely there's a bit of a fear of heights there. But I would love to go and do a zip line. I would think I go to California a lot, so I was thinking that it would be fun to plan a layover in Vegas to be able to do that. Even if I just do like a fly in the morning and fly out at night, so I can run to the Strip, get on the zip line, and then head out.
Vegas is insane. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. And then I went to Vegas once before and I didn't see much of it because I couldn't move.
Right.
And I think there's just a lot of things I want to be able to, explore and do. And do with my family and be able to enjoy and, be able to push myself more at work and not worry so much about being exhausted all the time. And and then I work on, like I look to people like you and to like Daryl, who have done some amazing things getting your podcast started. I'm the perpetual starter of working on a podcast. I'm terrified of my own voice, but I have it going, and I've got it hosted and ready to go. I just have to get some more episodes recorded so I can get them out there.
Oh man, you're a natural, dude. We've been going an hour, and you're a total natural with it.
Well, I think when I talk to other people, I get a little better at talking. So sure. That's a big part of what I want to do with that. Specifically, I want to focus on big men's issues and what it's like to be a big guy and, to live the life as a fat guy and to kind of explore and expose that for some people. And not a hard hitting expose, but more talk about these things that we don't normally talk about.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot in the fitness sphere, which I think is amazing, that supports, women's issues and, helping them deal with the very specific, because I think we do deal with some very different specific issues.
Yep.
And I would like to see, I love seeing voices like yourself and like Daryl and people like Keto Savage and a lot of others who are talking about some of the issues that, also affect women, but also affect men specifically. And so my podcast is going to be the Fat Guy Forum. And I'm excited to get that going and see where that takes me. And I've got a ton of other things that I would love to now devote my energy to. And whether that's through cooking and recipe development and trying to put some resources out there like that. I'm also working on an ebook with some of my recipes that people have asked for. So I'm just trying to, I think it's finding the focus now to actually complete these projects that I start is something I would love to see myself do over the next couple of years and know that I can do that without having to worry about all these other things that I used to eat up that space in my head.
Well, I think you're absolutely going to crush it just like you've done so far in your weight loss journey. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough for your time and your graciousness to share these very personal stories. And before you go, please tell everybody where you want them to go. Check them out, Instagram, plug all that stuff. Sure. And let them know where to get you.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. I've wanted to do it for a while, so I'm glad we got to do it.
Definitely.
And I think if you're looking for me, Instagram is the primary place to go right now. My handle on Instagram is Gormy, GORMY _goes_keto, gormygoesketo. Gormy, so my old handle was Gormandizer, which was a play on my last name again, but Gormandize means to eat voraciously. So that was where that came from. So the Gormandizer has been laid to rest, and now I stick more to Gormy, but you can call me Mike Gorman. It doesn't matter, whatever they want to do.
Right.
But I'm out there on Instagram. If there's anything anyone ever wants to talk to me about, I love DMing and hit me up, and we'll see what comes from everything. And watch for my promotion of the Fat Guy Forum. It should be coming up real soon.
You heard the man. Stop what you're doing right now. Go to Instagram if you're not already following this guy, Gormy _goes_keto. He's one of the realest guys out there on Instagram. Stop what you're doing and go follow him right now. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks again for the time. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. I had a blast.
Thanks, Gary. You keep up all the hard work that you're doing, because really, man, you are, and you're inspiring a lot of people. So I really appreciate that. You inspire me all the time. Keep it up, man.
Thank you, brother. Remember at the beginning of the show, I mentioned a little thing called Patreon? Well, I'd love to have you join me. But Gary, what is Patreon? It's a website that is helping small creators like me raise funds to further expand their creative visions. For as low as $1 a month, you can help me further my dream of reaching as many people as possible and eventually taking the show on the road to meet all these fine people face to face and add a video element to this podcast. If you were to donate $4 a month, you'd be hearing this show a few days earlier with no commercials and getting access to my close friends group on Instagram. Donate $10 a month and you get all that plus your name right at the beginning of the show alongside other producers. But act fast. That tier is limited to 10 people. I've got a whole lot more to offer, and you can get all the details over at patreon.com/Gary Cantrell. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for checking out the show, and I'll talk to you again really soon. hardworkalwayswins.com. It's more than just a clothing line. It's my mantra. I speak it, I wear it, I live it, and I'd love to have you join the Hard Work Squad. We're constantly adding new items to the store, including our brand new Future-ish hats, which come in a variety of colors, including camo. I mean, who doesn't like camo? We also just put our famous Splash logo in gold to match our OG logo, and there's so much more here. You just got to check it out. Here's the best part. Use the code PODCAST at checkout to take 10% off of your very first order and join the Hard Work Squad today.